Welcome back to Protecting the Legal Rights of Artists and Designers. This is the contract analysis simplified presentation, and it fits with the reading materials from Graphic Artists Guild as well as the video from Legal Eagles. It's the process of how to get into and out of a contract. So this is the simplified version that I helped develop from a more complex visual analysis that we used in the class years ago. Here, I'll pull that up. These charts we used in a class years ago, they were full of details in the contract process that we really don't need to discuss for the class. Really, the goal is to make it so you have a working knowledge and understanding of the contract process, not to turn you into attorneys. Now, normally, this presentation, I do this in person using a giant-sized wall-sized whiteboard in the classroom. This is a photo of the drawing that we did last year, and we don't have access to the room because of the coronavirus, so we're going to be doing this instead using similar visuals with the same type of ideas, using the magic of PowerPoint to show you visually the different steps in the process of getting into and out of a contract. Alright, so we'll get started. And again, this is the simplified version. When you're starting the analysis, you need to ask yourself at the beginning of the process, do you have a contract? Remember that it's about relationships, expectations, process, and consequences. Contract law and this visual fit right into this. Now, if you haven't already downloaded the PDF file that I left for you on GoStudio, go pull that up and get it. You may want to take notes on it and use it to help you follow along. Stage one is the contract basis. You got an offer, you got acceptance, and this is the first part of the process to determine if you have a starting point for a contractual agreement. It's offer and acceptance. You have to have a valid offer to do something from one party to another, and then acceptance of that by the other party with the terms of the offer. Terms have to match. And it has to be mutual, meaning both parties have to agree to the terms. So, one party makes an offer, promises to do something, and the other party has the option to accept. Maybe the other party accepts with another promise. I promise to pay you money if you promise to paint my house. Oh, I promise to paint your house for money. We have a deal. Maybe it's a promise for performance. I promise to pay you if you paint my house, and the other party paints the house. The performance was the acceptance. You get a promise in exchange for a promise, or a promise in exchange for performance. And again, it has to be mutual. So I'm drawing this out, and you're going to see this concept again. Alright. So it could be that simple to get to the basis of a contract. You get the offer, you get acceptance, they agree and say yes, and that gets you to the basis of agreement. If that's the case, great. Yay, you've got a basis for a contract. Or maybe they say no. So saying no is a rejection of the offer. Flat out, that means there's no contract. If that's the case, you end the analysis right here and you are done. But maybe that's not it. Maybe the other party didn't say yes and you didn't say no. So instead, what you wind up with is a change in the original terms. I'm willing to do the work, but you have to pay me more money. I'm willing to do the work, but it will take me twice as long to do it. You get new terms, and the new terms have to be accepted by the original party. That's what's called a counteroffer. It is not acceptance. It actually is a new offer that the original party can now accept or reject. So maybe there's acceptance. Okay, I agree to pay you more money if you paint my house. That would be acceptance. That would lead to the basis of an agreement. Or maybe there is an agreement. Maybe there isn't an acceptance of the new terms and it's rejected. So, in that case, you follow the process, and that would mean if it's a rejection, there's no contract. Or it could be there's another opportunity to negotiate and offer different terms, another counteroffer. This process can go on and on and on until you either get acceptance or rejection. All right, so you have the offer, counteroffer, then acceptance of the counteroffer. Great. Yay. You got the basis of an agreement. Let's move on. Stage 2 is consideration. What is consideration? Consideration is this magical legal term. It doesn't mean being considerate. It doesn't mean that the parties have to consider the other party's offer or counteroffers. This is a term that means something of value exchanged for something else of value. I promise to pay you if you promise to paint my house. One promise is something of value. A person is worth their word. The other promise is something of value. I promise to paint. You can exchange one promise for the other, or it could be that performance is something of value. You can exchange that for a promise. And again, it has to be mutual. So you can have a promise in exchange for a promise, something of value for something of value, promise in exchange for performance, something of value for something of value. So, maybe they don't exchange something of value. Maybe there was no consideration. Maybe there was no intent to have an exchange. Maybe it was meant to be a gift. Nothing expected back, no expectation of an exchange. It was donation. For your birthday, I'm going to give you a new car. Because I like you, I'm giving you all bonus points for the semester. Or, here's a $50 tip for driving me to my destination. There's no quid pro quo, no exchange or expectation of exchange. Maybe it was a joke. No intent to actually follow through on a promise, and it was reasonable to assume that it was meant as a joke. I'll give you $1 million if you take out the trash. Or, if you can make it by 5 p.m., I'll give you my house. Maybe it was where there was a prior duty involved. Maybe there was fraud or mistake, and you have nothing of value exchanged. There's nothing new that is added. So if there's no consideration, then there's no contract, and we are done with the analysis. Now, I'm going to have some legal scholars say to me, what about detrimental reliance? It's this concept, detrimental reliance. When somebody relies upon a representation of someone else, even if it was a joke or a gift, that might be considered a substitute for consideration, for something of value. Yes, if there is a change in circumstances based on reasonable reliance on the representations of somebody else, it's possible to use what we call quasi-contract theories to try and enforce or force or compel that person to follow through on that representation. So, Grandma says she's going to pay for your college tuition, and you don't have to worry about a thing. The next day, she changes her mind and says she's not going to do it. You can't force her to pay the tuition because it was a gift. You weren't giving her anything in exchange. No consideration, so no contract. I promise to pay, that's an offer. And if you accept the offer, sure, that's acceptance, but you have to give something in order to get something. There There has to be an exchange. That example only went one way. Now change it a little bit. Grandma promises to pay your college tuition and you accept. You then sign up for school for the semester in reliance upon her representation and rent an apartment and move to the city and quit your job and so on. If relying upon a representation was reasonable, it may be possible to use detrimental reliance as a theory to act as a substitute for consideration. So yes, it's possible to sue grandma for the gift, and it's been done. But don't hang your hat on that theory. All right, back to the whiteboard. Let's say that there has been exchange of things of value, promise for promise, or promise for performance. You've got consideration. Something of value has been exchanged. Congratulations, you have the basis of a contract. Even if you don't have all of the terms worked out, that can be figured out at a later time. So, that can be yay, or that could be rats, depending on whether you want to be in a contractual relationship or not. All right, let's move on and see what happens next. Stage 3, excuses and defenses. As part of the analysis, ask whether the parties are pleased with the terms of the agreement. Is everybody happy? Yes? Great. Then it's a valid contract as long as everybody follows through. No? Not everyone happy? Okay. There are excuses and defenses that may apply. Excuses from performance and defenses to contract. Incapacity. You've got maybe someone who is too young to enter into a contract. They're under the age of 18. They're considered a minor. Society protects young people from themselves and as policy makes contracts with minors unenforceable by the other party. If someone's mentally incompetent, the contract is not enforceable because they didn't have the capacity to enter into the agreement. Mistake, where the parties are mistaken about the nature of the relationship and the consideration, and it is material or substantial to the agreement, that can be a defense. Misconduct, such as duress, forcing somebody to enter into a contract. Non-disclosure, not revealing important facts that would have allowed the other party to make an informed decision. Undue influence, someone is using a position of influence to manipulate the other party to agreeing. Misrepresentation, it's a kind way of saying lying. Unconscionability, acting in a way to take advantage of the other party in a way that would shock the conscience of people. You've also got impossibility of performance or impracticality, where circumstances have changed from the initial agreement when it was made, changing the ability of the parties to perform, and they couldn't anticipate it. This is things like a natural disaster or a pandemic or a radical change in the market. There's public policy and illegality. This is where it would be unfair to enforce an agreement, and the courts use their powers to balance, or you've got a law, like a regulation, that would help prevent someone from harming themselves. Or it could be where something has become illegal and the law now restricts people from performing such acts. And the statute of frauds. Certain types of contracts have to be in writing to be enforceable. The statute of frauds says that certain types of transactions have to be in writing to be enforceable, such as real estate or an agreement for over a certain dollar amount or a contract that's going to last for a year or longer. Those need to be in writing under the statute of frauds. So, if there is one of these reasons to get out of a contract, excuses and defenses such as incapacity, mistake, misconduct, impossibility or impracticality, public policy or illegality, or the statute of frauds, should the parties try to get out of the agreement? Is it worth it? That puts us to stage 4. Breach and remedies. Breach is when one party doesn't follow through on the obligations or promises. Is there a valid excuse or defense? Yes. Then you get out of the contract and it can't be enforced. It's as if it didn't exist and you can't enforce it. If there isn't a valid excuse or defense, then there is an enforceable contract. If you don't follow through with the promises made, you could be sued and there could be consequences. Is it worth it? Have the honest conversation. If it will cost too much to break the terms of the contract, to breach the obligations, then follow the terms. If it will cost too much to follow through, then face the consequences. All right, that takes us to the next page. Remedies. What outcomes or consequences can be enforced against the breaching party? Enforcement can mean a lawsuit. Remember what we did in class with shoots and lawyers. That's a process that can be used to resolve a dispute. What outcomes can be enforced to remedy the situation? What options? One option is damages. You've got compensation, expected profits, losses, punitive damages, and liquidated damages. Compensation is money paid to compensate and make up for the loss. Expected profits is money paid to put the party in a position they're supposed to be in if the other party performed. Losses incurred is money for losses that are suffered from the other party not performing. Punitive damages, those are to punish someone who acted willfully or recklessly and it merits damages above simple compensation. Liquidated damages, when the parties cannot determine what the loss will be, and so they set up a specific agreement of the amount ahead of time. An example of something like this would be a limited warranty. Specific performance is another option, requiring a party to complete a contract. The value that the party brings is unique. No one else can do this, and there is no substitute, such as with real estate, where location is important, or with artists and performers. And reformation and rescission is another option, reforming the terms of the contract to make it work and to put a contract in place, or rescind a contract and remove it as if the parties never entered into an agreement. All of these are options available as remedies. Okay, that's the simplified version of contract analysis, how to get into and out of a contract. Hopefully this explanation has given you some insight on how the process works. Make sure that you leave a comment below to get your class participation points, and make sure that it is meaningful and gives some insight. I'll be back for the next video.